It is one of the strangest tales ever told. I think it will thrill you. It may shock you. It might even horrify you.
Welcome to the Dark Fantastic!
I'm not a monster, Jake.
I'll show you who I am and what I am.
Yeah, you love this one. It's a scream, baby.
It's showtime.
I am your mother.
Time to float.
I don't feel like she's not a mistake at all. Like she's better for being different.
Gender fluid.
No matter what, you keep finding something to fight for.
Hey, Michael!
What's your favorite scary movie?
You want stars? I'll give you stars.
So if any of you feel that you do not care to subject your nerves to such a strain, now is your chance to, well, we've warned you.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Theme Park Workshop podcast. This is episode 37, I believe, and yes, it is our prep-isode. Everything you need to know about Halloween Horror Nights 2023 or Halloween Horror Nights 32 here in Orlando. It's very exciting, and it's so exciting that, we're looking forward to the event, and we think everything's going to be a great fun time. But what should you know before going into it? What should you expect? And to help us talk about what to expect, we've got a great, awesome panel with us here today. So we've got our regular folks. We've got Kelly Hoffman.
Hello, I am currently dreaming of twisted taters.
And we've got Bella Harvey.
Hi, suddenly black lipstick has appeared in all of my makeup bags.
And we've got Christian Nixon.
Hi there, I'm ready to get scared out of my shorts.
And Jonathan from the HHN 365 podcast.
Hello. I don't have anything clever to say, so thank you for inviting me today.
Now we're so glad to have y'all, and of course, I'm Adam Johnson. I'm still looking for Another Way Out. I've not stopped listening to that since last year. So as I mentioned before, this is our prep-isode, and there's some newbies, I'm sure, listening to the show who are like, I'm interested in Halloween Horror Nights, or my mom dragged me into going to Halloween Horror Nights, or whomever. What should I expect on my first time? So I'm going to open up to y'all. What should newbies expect on their first time here at Halloween Horror Nights?
Expect a lot of fog. I definitely think, I'm trying to think back to the first time I went. It was quite a bit ago. I think I was like 15 years old, and so it was like 11 years ago, I guess. But definitely the thing that was huge for me was that it's just a lot in a great way, and it's also super overwhelming. So expect a lot of fog, a lot of like crazy light things, really loud. Like I always recommend people have like acoustic earplugs if you have any kind of sensitivity to noise, because that's what I use. They're not visible. They're awesome. And just like be prepared to there's a lot of people, it's a lot of stuff, but you are going to have the best time. And it's so much fun.
Yeah, you took the words right out of my mouth, Kelly. I was going to say, expect lots of loud noises, which this is only my third year going to Horror Nights, and I'm just now getting into the swing of it, getting used to it. So definitely earplugs are a must. I don't really like the loop earplugs. They didn't really work for me in houses. So I always buy a really big bottle of the foam ones from CVS, and I'm still on my bottle from my first year. So I would highly recommend that. But just expect to have a lot of fun. There's going to be a lot of people. It's going to be hot. You're going to be sweaty, but you're going to experience some of your favorite IPs, and you're just going to have a lot of fun.
Go in with a game plan. Figure out what houses you want to do and what shows you want to see, what food you want to eat, and kind of make yourself a map. They have maps at the front of the park. Maybe take 5 minutes, talk with your group or just to yourself and think what you're going to do. Just plan accordingly. And because the worst thing that you can do is just kill time. You bought your ticket, maybe you're only there for one day. There's a lot to do, and you're going to need to push in everything if you want to get it all done in one day. But for those who are fortunate enough to do a multi-day ticket, again, though, still plan out what you want to do. I hate going in without a plan.
See, it's funny. I'm the exact same way. My first time going to Horror Nights, I only had one day, so planning was necessary. Not just normal planning, but also, things like Stay and Scream and Express, and sort of figuring out what houses we're going to have the longest lines and planning around that. Especially if you're going in, you only have one day. be careful about where you spend your time. If you walk right into a Stranger Things line that's 2 or 3 hours, there's a chance you can't get, most of the other stuff done because you've been waiting in that line for such a long period of time. I mean, even waiting for food can take a while depending on where you go. So I completely agree with that. Planning is absolutely necessary if your goal is to get all the houses done and, do as much as you want to do at the event.
Yeah, I agree, because my first Halloween Horror Nights, we really didn't have much of a plan. We had priorities. Like for me, I wanted to go to Halloween Horror Nights in 2019 because my Universal monsters were there. How could I resist them? I loved it. But then like trying to figure out, okay, when we're going to have food and when we're going to go into the store and getting stuck in some of the longer lines and getting there late. There's a whole lot of things I wish we had done differently to do everything. And so I can talk about like Yeti Terror of the Yukon, which I can't. I've only seen the YouTube videos because I didn't get to it. But yeah, as some of y'all were saying, like it is an overwhelming event. There's a lot happening. It's very scary, but I think the scariness also comes with a whole lot of fun. Like, chainsaws come at you, like you kind of freeze up or you think it's funny. But either way, like once you like scream and get it out of your system, I think you can breathe easy and you kind of laugh with your friends and whoever else. It's just the atmosphere of fun. I think when you kind of like let yourself into and you kind of get over the nerves of your first house or your first scare zone in the cramped Central Park space or what have you, I think the event really opens itself up and you notice things like the art design and all the wonderful, wonderful things.
When you talked about going into like your first house and being nervous, I always tell people, because like my whole family is going to be going for their first time this year because of Stranger Things, so I'm starting to like mentally prepare them now. I always say to like go into like the not scary, air quotations, not scary house first. So my first one was Beetlejuice. I was still scared out of my mind because I had watched these YouTube videos religiously. Also, that's a tip. If you're really nervous, watch the YouTube video walkthroughs and try to memorize what's going on. That's helped me. But I was so scared going through Beetlejuice, and it was a lot closer than I thought. It was a lot louder than I thought, even with earplugs. And I mean, coming out of it, I've gone to Horror Nights almost 50 times now. So you'll get not like get over your fear, but like the first house, first zone, it's always hard, but then like you get into it quicker, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, and the fear gets more fun too when you are more used to it. But I would say 2 quick tips that are just things that I wish I knew about sooner, like when I first started going, is Stay and Scream is really amazing, especially if you're not doing Express or, Express only gets you in once per house if you have a regular Express pass. So definitely something to consider, that if you want to make sure you're getting in extra houses and you're in there early, you can do Stay and Scream either by having access to the park, whether it's an annual pass, a day ticket, or the Scream early ticket, which has gotten expensive for what it is, but it gets you in at like 3. And then you can also, if you're staying at a Universal hotel, you can kind of go in a Stay and Scream type area as well. That's a holding over by where Blue Man Group used to be. But the other thing that's super helpful is that the Coke Freestyle machines are available throughout the park and throughout City Walk, and they're really awesome. You can either pay to activate one of the Freestyle cups, either that you already own or buy a new one. They do have themed ones, of course, for Horror Nights. Or you can also just bring like a water bottle or something that you can fill up, because water is always free. Soda, you need the barcode.
Yes, I agree. Do yourself a favor and get yourself a souvenir and get the cup for Horror Nights. It's a fun little something to take home. And pack a bag. If you have like a small lounge fly or something similar to that size, I think that'll get you by just perfectly. For me, I was able to fit my Horror Nights cup inside and anything else that I might need. So I brought hand sanitizer because, you're going to be eating food and you're going to want to clean off your hands, something real quick. Maybe for some people, if you're out there early, put on sunscreen. That's also important. Maybe you want to pack yourself a little mini fan while you're standing in a line, because while you're standing out there in the lines, they don't always have fans blowing on you, keeping you cool. So bring a little pocket fan, something like that. And just anything else that you feel is important to you, just keep it on you. Remember where it's at, pack it, be ready.
Getting into things of like, what should you expect for your first time? Like anything that happens in Florida, prepare for the rain. These houses are all indoors, but the lines are entirely outdoors. Unless they do what they did for the Hell Block Horror House last year, and they've got this big waiting area inside a soundstage for some reason. So like have your poncho so you don't have to be like, oh no, it's raining. I guess we got to go into and not wait for a house. Of course, if it's lightning, thunder, all that jazz, like quick, go to Men in Black, or quick, go into a restaurant, get some pizza fries. Definitely like prepare for rain, bring the umbrella, bring the poncho, bring your galoshes. One thing I'm going to do is try to bring books to read in the lines because my phone dies too fast to.
I especially agree with the preparing for rain if you're going on opening nights. Because almost every single year it pours on that night. So definitely prepare. I don't know what it is. I don't know why it's like that, but it's almost it's very consistent and that it rains every opening night. So definitely be prepared for that.
Bring an extra pair of socks if you're wearing like Converse, tennis shoe, sneakers, because you don't want to be walking around in wet, squishy socks.
Also, don't wear the cute combat boots unless you're prepared to walk in those all night, because I have seen many a person struggle with that. So I guess just pay attention to your outfit, make sure it's ready for any kind of weather conditions you could have, and walking around a lot, especially if you're not used to walking for 6, 8, 10 hours at a time.
Basically, just prepare like you're going into war, and you should be fine.
I mean, in a way, scary things are happening.
Oh, I would definitely like to add, take your time and stop into the tribute shop. The Horror Nights crew does a wonderful job decorating the tribute store every single year. It's an experience on its own. I personally love the candles that they put out every year. I have one myself. I have the Halloween Fog and the one from Wicked Growth, which is a very pumpkin fall smelling candle. I'm a huge fan of that one. But take your time, shop through the stores, and luckily for some people, if you're an annual pass holder, they have some limited edition merchandise that you can also pick up.
Yeah, and I mean this year's theme that they announced of sort of walking right into a comic book is just really cool. I mean, they even just released like a merch idea where you can be on the cover of a comic book on one of these 5 comic books, and even one of them is like themed to Boris Schuster. So it's very exciting. I'm super excited for this year's tribute store. I think it's going to be something really special that they haven't really tackled before.
I completely agree. It's so fun to walk through and how it ties into the theme in strange and unexpected ways. So I don't know how the comic book's going to tie into the theme. It might just be a fun thing, but in the past, I've never been let down by a Halloween Horror Nights tribute store, and they do some good work over there. And it's back in New York, not in that little Hollywood space
where it belongs.
Revenge of the Mummy doesn't need an extended queue. Just yeah. Oh, another thing to expect, the rides are open, so enjoy those.
It is limited rides, just to make a note of that. They haven't released exactly which rides. Usually the ones that are closed have something to do with, like, they're used for a queue. So unfortunately, our favorite Fast and Furious is going to be closed. Dang it.
Rats. Shucks.
But it is really cool going on, if you like roller coasters, Rip Ride Rocket at night. The vibes are there. It's really fun.
It's just definitely be careful of time management though, because I mean, I've been going to HHN for a while, and my friend who hasn't really been to Universal had an HHN day. It's like, all right, great, gonna spend the time at HHN, and like the third thing he wanted to do was ride Gringotts, and I'm like, listen, I understand you haven't ridden Gringotts before. It's an exciting, idea, but if you ride Gringotts, all of a sudden those other houses are gonna immediately become hour waits. And he's like, no, I want to ride Gringotts. I'm like, all right, we'll ride it. And the minute we finished, every house was all of a sudden, no more walk-ons, no more 20 minutes or 15 minutes. They were all 45 minutes and up. So definitely be careful. I say if you want to ride something, wait till you're not going to do any houses, because all the lines are, terrible in hours and you don't want to wait in them. That's a great time to have food, ride rides, watch the shows or show in this year's instance, and everything like that. So definitely plan accordingly if your goal is to get through all the houses, especially.
Yes, and I think Nightmare Fuel is the hidden gem of Horror Nights. I think it adds something so very special. And if you somehow decide that you don't want to do all the houses, maybe take that time to watch the show, because it's really impressive and they put on a really good show. I do recommend getting there early though. It does fill up very, very fast.
We're going to transition now into our scare zones. So this is like one of the two big pillars of Halloween Horror Nights is the scare zones or the streets. The horror is not just in the houses, they are everywhere. They're in the Production Central, formerly Production Central, so it's probably going to be like either within Minion Land or outside of Minion Land. It's going to be in Hollywood, the Central Park area with all the trees, the New York section, and of course San Francisco, the back area where like Men in Black and the 10 houses are and the show is, and the old Fear Factor stage that tends to be more light, but still the scare zones pack some of the same thrills as the houses, but you get to spend more time in there. So they're definitely something special and something you should definitely take some time to enjoy and explore and take in if you can. But before we get into what the scare zones specifically are this year, I want to ask y'all, what do you kind of look forward to when it comes to scare zones?
I guess I'll go first. I mean, I love watching other people get scared, right? Like that's my favorite part about it. Sitting in the zone, getting the ambiance, especially if it's a zone like Graveyard Deadly Unrest, where it's very, very immersive. Watching the scare actors act and really watching them get the guests. I think that's really fun and exciting. And it's also cool when they have shows as well and you can watch those, and just, I like enjoying the zone. I think sitting and taking your time to really experience it, if you have the time, is something really awesome. And I like getting scared in zones whenever I do. So yeah.
Yeah, I definitely agree with all of that. I think my favorite thing, because I think back to my favorite year for scare zones was in 2018 at HHN 28, because I just felt like there were so many. Like I enjoyed my experience in every single one of those zones. And I think my favorite part personally was if you have a multi-night ticket, just like getting to kind of know those scare actors, and that you see a lot of the same ones every night. I mean, there's usually a couple casts, but just like getting to know them and they recognize you and having these fun interactions. So even if you're only going for one night, you can have some really incredible interactions in there, scary interactions, funny interactions. I know there was a Twisted Tradition scare zone that year, which had these kind of like stereotypical like high schooler, like there's the nerd and the jock and a cheerleader and everything, and the jock guy was kind of like the villain, but every night my friend and I would cheer for him, and his name was Chad, so we'd go Chad, and he like at the end of the run was like, hey, you guys were super awesome, like thanks for cheering for me, in character and everything, but he was just like, thank you so much, because nobody ever cheers for me. So he like remembered us. So I would say like those, just I agree completely with what Jonathan said, like hang out in there, kind of get to know these characters and spend time with them and interact with them. And it doesn't have to be just walking by and getting scared. Like you can really spend time in a lot of these zones. And it certainly looks like we might get some kind of shows and experiences, especially like Summerfest 69 looks like there's going to be some probably musical performances, so definitely hang out and soak up everything there's to offer.
I especially enjoy the scare zones for the reason that it allows you to get as close as you can to some of the sets that they created. When you go through the houses, you're moving one by one, and you can still take it all in, but usually you have to go through a few times to kind of see everything. But with the scare zones, there's none of that. You can take as much time as you want, and I think you can really get up close and personal with some of the things that you might want to look into. And one thing that I really liked from HHN 30 was like the Seek and Destroy zone, and that one you were fortunate or maybe unfortunate to be a part of their stage performance there. And I really like the interaction that they did with that, especially with the controller that they had. They had someone talk to you, and you got to play a part yourself, which was a really unique experience and probably something that you can't really get anywhere else.
Yeah, I remember me and Christian, we were there with a couple friends. It was the last night, and he got pulled up to the stage to like be a part of the thing, and I ran away because Chainsaws and I aren't friends. But what I really love about the scare zones is just like the detail that goes into it. Like the theming and the detail of the event doesn't just stop at houses. They really they go ham for the zones. And with everything we've seen being put out this year already, I think we're in for like a really big treat, because all of these things, all these zones are so detailed already. I can't wait to see it with all the tarps gone, It's dark outside, all the specialty lighting on, the fog, and all the actors. I just like, I can't wait.
I definitely think back to like some of my big Horror Nights memories, and some of them are in the houses, sure, because they're, if a scare hits really good, like last year's triple scare and Legends Collide, like you're gonna remember that, or seeing the Deadman's Pier for the first time last year, like you're gonna remember that. But when I think back to some of my favorite moments, I think like just hanging out in Zombieland Double Tap. I know it's not a popular scare zone, but it was a fun scare zone. And my brother still talks about it from when we went all those years ago, 4 years ago. I know, such a long time, 4 years ago. Or just hanging out. We weren't in an arcade all that much, but the Killer Clowns line was like basically in the zone. And that's just like burned in my brain. Or talking about like just spending time in it. I think that's what helped me finally appreciate Graveyard Deadly Unrest last year. It was kind of at the bottom of my list as far as scare zones went, because the strength of that zone was really in just being immersed in it and seeing like the two, I forget the two brothers. I think one was Death and I forget the other one, but they were, they were haunting, or like, leading the spirits and all of that, which you wouldn't get if you were just like running through it in order to get to the kids zone houses or anything like that. And then, I also remember being like surrounded by all the ghosts in Graveyard. So that made it shoot up my list and really kind of made me remember that zone, over the course of the years. And it's great hearing people's stories in the zones. I know some as Kelly, I think you were saying, like, you really remember some of these characters if you make those connections. I know a lot of people really connected to the grandpa character last year in Sweet Revenge. And I know that actor, I follow him on Twitter, and he's still proud of his work there. And that's really fun to hear and see. And I know people have had like important events happen to them in the scare zones. And that's just the power of stories, which is really weird to say for it's like, oh, it's a theme park ride. How can my life change because of a theme park ride or a theme park land? It happens sometimes, and that's a great thing about stories. And that's not always going to happen when you're rushing 15 seconds. Like, I wish I got to see Vanity Ball, but I saw 15 seconds of Vanity Ball because we were booking it to Monsters. So if I could tell my past self who's going to Horror Nights for the first time, like, listen, I know you want to do all the houses, you're not going to do it. So maybe just hang out, give everything the time you're going to give Zombieland, so you can say whether you like the Viking zone or not. And there's going to be some great zones as well this year that you will definitely want to stick around for, is my guess. I'm not trying to sell the event to you, listener, but I'm hyped for them, as I think a lot of us are, probably all of us are. So let's break it down. Let's break it down. So this is the first time since the mid 2010s that all of the scare zones tied directly into the theme or icon. I'm not going to say which year was the last year that did, because it kind of depends on how you interpret it. But somewhere back then, it's just been a while since they're all kind of connected, whether thematically or like directly. And this year, it is freaking direct. Everything is connected to this year's icon, Dr. Oddfellow, who has some deep connections to HHN lore going all the way back to Jack in 2000. If you don't know Jack the Clown, he is Halloween Horror Nights. Yeah, that's pretty much it. So we're going to find out some of the origin stories through these zones, and of course in a house that we're going to get to later. And just to quickly break those down, we've got the Dr. Oddfellow's collection of horror. This is the first zone that you're going to enter in. It's our table of contents zone. And then over in Hollywood, you find the Dark Zodiac, and you're going to see all these Zodiac creatures. And this is kind of integral to his whole backstory with his power of the Zodiac and immortality and his Cane of Souls. Like, they're going to go into it. And Jungle of Doom Expedition Horror, which is going to be this dark jungle themed zone in Central Park. It's going to take place in the 20s. And so that's part of his backstory before his house. And then Vamp 69, which is a sequel. That's going to be in the New York section. So that's where Revenge of the Mummy and Jimmy Fallon are. And Louis Pizza, if you like Louis Pizza. Vamp 69 is going to be there. Vamp 69 Summer of Blood, yet another HHN Vamp zone, and home to the tribute store, as we mentioned before. And then lastly, Shipyard 32, Horrors Unhinged over in San Francisco. It's nautical, it's monstrous. It's kind of going to be this year's end concept. I'm not going to say in quality, because I know this house was not popular last year, but it's kind of going to be the Hell Block horror of this year, where you get to see a lot of old monsters make their appearance. And for all the lore heads out there, I'm sure it's going to be a complete treasure trove. Yeah. So what are y'all thinking about these scare zones, specifically these scare zones, and what are you looking forward to them this year, Bella?
I am so excited for the Vamp 69 zone. I have wanted to do the Vamp zones for so long. Like, I remember watching all the Vamp 89 videos just like on constant loop whenever that year was happening because I was too scared to actually go to the event. Shout out Tim Tracker. I think it's such a cool concept. And like I said before, it's giving me like Daisy Jones of the Six vibes. But I think all the set pieces already look so cool. All the bright colors, the vibrant colors, and I'm excited to see what these vampires are going to look like because like 1969, I think about like hippies and like, so I'm excited. And then plus the tribute store is a New York comic book store. So it's got the gears turning on how those two can intertwine. So I don't know. That is my most hyped. I cannot wait.
I'm also definitely very hyped for that one. I have been to the other two. I loved Vamp 55. Vamp 85 was during 28, which I said was my favorite year for scare zones that I've been to. So obviously I really loved that. It was my favorite one that year. And I really enjoyed standing there and like there's shows that I got to watch. There was like a ball that dropped for like New Year's Eve, which was really cool. And I think I mentioned on our last HHN episode that I was there like the night that it turned into Halloween at midnight. We all watched the show and it's just, there are really cool experiences like that. I'm sure they're going to have a lot of tricks up their sleeves. So that's going to be a great zone. I'm also super intrigued about Dark Zodiac as well, because I just think that's such an interesting concept. And I don't really know a lot about the zodiac signs other than my own. But I'm interested to see like how those are going to tie in. And it seems like it's going to have a lot of elemental stuff as well. Like, the earth, water, fire, air. And I'm just curious to see how they're going to do all of that.
And for me, maybe I'm the odd one out, but I'm looking forward to Shipyard 32 just because based off what I've seen, it seems like they're repurposing a lot of Dead Man's Wharf, which was a Horror Nights house last year, which I thought, which it may not be everyone's favorite, but I thought it was the most visually stunning house of them all. So I'm looking forward to see what they repurpose out of that and maybe any other set pieces that they had. And of course, if you're a fan of monsters, I think you can't go wrong with the monsters.
What I find super interesting about that zone, besides its sort of connection, its fun connection to Hell Block Horror, which I joke on a lot, is that all the monsters that are going to be in it, they've said there's going to be past Horror Nights creatures in it. They hinted in the podcast that Oddfellow could be responsible for these creatures. Past houses. Like he could have dumped them somewhere, and that's how a house happened, is because Oddfellow caused it. We already learned how he caused, or he's going to cause Vamp 69. So it's cool to look back and see whatever creatures in there go, hey, did he cause that house? Is that now canon? Did Oddfellow create that? Even though that's not what they were thinking when they were making that house, but now it's another layer of detail and stuff like that. But the one I'm definitely most excited for, which isn't a super popular one, I don't think, is Jungle of Doom. I think the sets look great, and the plants everywhere, and the big plane, and now the rats that just appeared today, they're cooking rats. I think it's so much fun. I think it's cool that they're going to be like animal nature creatures in the zone like that. Those are going to be the main scares. They said Oddfellow is experimenting on a bunch of nature, and that's that you're going to encounter that in the zone, which is really exciting to me. And I think the coolest thing about these zones in general as a whole is that if you start in Hollywood, which is Zodiac, and just go around that way all the way back to all the way back to New York, it is that's the timeline. It goes in order. You start with Zodiac, which is him learning how to harness the power, but then you immediately go into Jungle, which is him getting the skull, and then you go into what's after that? Then you go into Shipyard, which is him seeing all the experimented creatures and putting them into places, and they all break out. Before that, you have his house, which explains how he harnessed power and became who he is now. And then you move on, and you got New York, which is in the 60s. Everything follows a timeline, and I think that is really cool. And if you want to experience the zones for the first time, and you're not doing Stay and Scream, you're just entering straight from the front of the park, I'd say that is the preferred way to experience them. Just go right in order to see how the story of Dr. Oddfellow plays out, in your own eyes, in person.
I also wanted to point out with the Jungle of Doom zone, there was a house in HHN 13, the director's year over at Islands of Adventure, called Jungle of Doom. And I don't think anyone really thinks about it too much or talks about it too much because it's a bit of a generic title. And from the sounds of it, when it was operating, it's a bit of a generic house. But I still think it's cool. They're still reaching back to that part of their history and saying, no, we can do something better. We can bring it back and expand it and tie it in with our current lore, more beefy lore with Dr. Oddfellow. It was going to be in all the zones in some aspect, whether it's like as the ringleader in the opening zone or as a monster, he can transform. That's part of his backstory. So he's like a vampire in Vamp 69. He's going to be different creatures in Shipyard 32. Maybe we'll see different forms of him in his house. I don't know. It's gonna be a time. Maybe he's the collector, and well, I'm getting a little ahead of myself, but maybe he'll show up in more than one house. I don't know, but I think that's cool that they're calling back to an old house and making it a zone.
I definitely love when Universal really dives back into their history, their HHN history, and creates things like that. Like usually they tend to pick more recent things. Like I think Dead Man's Wharf was a pretty recent thing and whatnot, but going all the way back to the Jungle of Doom is really crazy, and they're doing really a completely different concept than what it was originally intended to be, and that is really exciting that they can evolve it to what it's eventually going to be now.
Yeah, and I will say, for me personally, like when I started going, I missed out on a lot of the like classic lore of like the icons, like the early icons and things like that. So one thing that really helped me was there's a Halloween Horror Nights wiki that if you Google it, you can find that and you can read about literally anything. Also, more lately, Discover Universal podcast has been doing some awesome things that explain a lot of the lore for this year specifically too, and go into some of that detail. But I loved like reading up on some of these things, and maybe I didn't get to do these previous houses from before the years that I've started going, but yeah, I'm super excited for this year. I think this is probably the most excited I've been for zones since 2018. Like I think that the zones this year sound really solid and interconnected. I'm actually really excited about the houses too this year, which we'll get into in a second. But I do love that they're pulling back to that lore, and they're even pulling back to some of their Universal in general lore when it comes to one of the houses. So I just think it's really cool that they do that.
Yeah, and like Kelly, I mean, HHN 30 was my first year. So obviously that was with the Icons house, and I got to learn about the icons and like, all their shenanigans. But it's been nice having a lot of HHN lore based houses and zones, because I can just like do a deep dive into the history and like feel like my brain is expanding with all this knowledge about it's I love it. It's fun. It's a cool take on it.
Shall we get into some houses? So I don't think we need to exactly, tell you what a house is, because I think when you think of horror event and you hear haunted houses, that's pretty self-explanatory. So what we're going to do is we're going to talk about, should you be excited for these? Why are we excited for these? What's there to look forward in each? How to get the most out of a house or going through houses? But also some of these they have the original concepts, which we've been teasing, but they also have intellectual property houses. So that's things that are pulled from other things. So like a game becomes a house, a movie becomes a house. Most of the rides every ride at Universal, except for Rip Ride Rocket, is pulled from a movie or a TV show and made into something. So that's kind of what you expect an IP to be. These are the things that are supposed to get you into the event and that are a lot of fun. Should we start with the IP or should we start with the originals, because we were talking about a lot of original lore and concepts, and I feel like we're kind of chomping at the bit for that.
Yeah, I say like let's keep going with the originals, because it definitely ties in a lot with the zones this year, which is really cool. Even if they don't directly relate, there's just so much lore this year. So yeah, let's talk about those originals.
Speaking of Dr. Oddfellow, he's getting a house this year. As Jonathan said, it takes place in the 30s. It's kind of an origin story for Dr. Oddfellow himself and his circus and these terrors that happen there. But fellas, are you looking forward to this? If so, why should we look forward to this?
I mean, we haven't gotten a full original icon house, not counting icons captured. That was more of a best of hits of old past icons. But we haven't really gotten a new original icon house since 26. And I think that's something to, really be excited about, that they're giving an icon their own house, not counting Wicked Growth before Pup Killer was an icon, kind of, a little bit, sort of, kind of. But I'm really excited. I think if you listen to the podcast, it gives a lot of details about what might be in here, including just some nasty visuals that can be, and gruesome visuals that can be really great in a house environments. I'm excited to see the story of Oddfellow take place in front of my own eyes, the most important part of his story. Also how he relates to Jack and all that good stuff. I think it's going to be a really good time. And sprung tent houses, I don't think they really ever fail. I haven't gone through one and hated it. I think sprung tents are usually very solid. So I think there's a lot to be excited about, and I'm definitely ready to experience the story of Dr. Oddfellow in person.
Yeah, I think this one's going to be really cool. I think it's going to be gross. I think it's going to be fun. I think it's going to be interesting. I just think there's going to be a lot of cool stuff packed in here, and I'm always really impressed by the sprung tent houses with how much stuff they can pile in there that you don't even realize that you're in a sprung tent. It just is very impressive how they do that. But I think it's going to be a really visually interesting house, is I think the best way to put it. I don't know what all of these sets are going to look like. I know they tease that there's going to be some interesting smells and stuff in this house too. It's going to be a wild, wacky time, and I'm here for it. I think it's going to be really cool, and I'm excited to kind of learn more about his lore and background, and in turn more of the HHN lore and background.
Yeah, I've been listening to the Discover Universal podcast, and I am excited to kind of see the conflict between him and Jack, and how Jack got his powers and how Dr. Oddfellow got his, with the Dark Zodiac. So I don't really know a lot of that lore. I'm still kind of learning and catching up, but I think it's going to be interesting to see. And the whole circus aspect that we're seeing kind of in the scare zone, I'm excited to see how that's going to tie in. I don't know. I don't know much, but I know I'm going to be living. So I can't wait.
So I just looked this up to double check, but this is going to be the second time we see Oddfellow in a house. Back in Jack's year, there's a house called the Fun House over in Sting Alley. So if you don't know where Sting Alley is, it's kind of like this nook in the middle of New York to take you from one side to the other. In the past, it's been a great place to decompress, also the place to get the best food. But that's where it used to be. So, obviously I wasn't there. I was 2 years old when that house was around, and I certainly had no interest in Halloween Horror Nights. But again, as we were saying before, Jonathan, you brought this up specifically, is when Universal pulls from their history and, all respecting that legacy, whether it's something silly like Jungle of Doom, silly in a way, or something meaty with the lore and the backstory. I think it's really neat. If you hate clowns, good luck. It's going to be a great time for you. Don't worry, there will definitely not be any clowns in the circus themed thing, and certainly no disturbing imagery. I think it's going to probably be no, of course not. Have fun though. Lore. I loved Case Files, and that was all a lore house, so anything lore is up my alley.
I'm excited for Oddfellows for the fact, like you said, just the whole clowns aspect. I really like Jack as an icon, so I'm kind of looking forward to seeing where it kind of all began with Dr. Oddfellows, because I never really got to experience any sort of clown house. I would say the closest thing I've come to is the puppet theater. So I'm kind of hoping that we see a few things returning from puppet theater, possibly. I was a big fan of that one. I think they could play into it a little bit, but overall, I'm excited to see some clowns. It's been some time.
Yes, can't wait. But I think this is probably gonna I know this house specifically that we're about to talk about my friend is not a fan of scary things. I locked him into his own apartment to watch a marathon of scary movies to get him to really love them. And he really isn't a fan of Horror Nights in general because scary and all of that. But even he is looking forward to this fan service explosion. Dueling Dragons: Choose Thy Fate. It is based on the classic Universal Studios Islands, or Universal Islands of Adventure. That's the official name now. The classic Universal Islands of Adventure roller coasters that open up the park in the Lost Continent section. Wow, I can't believe they're pulling back on that. I believe kind of like Reign of Kong recently had before they got rid of it. They had scare actors in the queue back in 1999 because it was so spooky and there were all of these things. So that is certainly exciting. There's going to be 4 different endings, they said on the podcast, because you do get to choose thy fate in some way. What a time, guys.
I am so excited. If you are a patron and you listen to the Patreon bonus episode, that chaotic episode, you will know that I am extremely hyped for this house. This is my number 1 on my hype list. I cannot wait. I loved Dueling Dragons when I was younger, going to the parks. It was like my favorite roller coaster. Hashtag Team Pyrock, because there's Pyrock and Blizzrock are the names of the dragons, and there were 2 different paths you could take when you were going on the roller coaster for those who haven't been on it. So you could choose to go to the red dragon and you could go a little bit faster, or you could go to the blue dragon and there were more loops on that one. So I always wanted to go to the red one because I was like, oh, it's faster, even though I was like, oh, but the blue one's prettier. So I always had an internal debate with that. But yeah, so it's kind of cool that they're taking this ride, which had a really interesting queue. If you've been on Dragon Challenge, which was before Hagrid's, it's similar. I mean, it was the same ride structure, but the queue was obviously very different because they themed it more towards Harry Potter, and they kind of got rid of the older lore that they're bringing back, which I'm so excited about this, if I haven't mentioned that already. But yeah, so it's going to be really interesting. The queue was really cool. The ride was really cool, and you got to choose your fate because you were picking a side. So I'm honestly, the reason I'm the most hyped for that is that I want to see how they're going to do that. And also, like, dragons. Obviously, I'm excited.
I'm also going to second Kelly, and this one is my most anticipated of the originals because you'll all see which is my number 1 IP house. There's no doubt about that. But for Dueling Dragons, I'm most excited for this one because of I grew up going to Universal, and unfortunately, I was at the age where I couldn't yet ride it, or more so the height. I wasn't at the height where I could ride it until it got rethemed to the Dragons Challenge, which I still got to go through the queue because I got to, I really wanted to be a part of it with my family. So I know a little bit about it. I just never got to actually ride it and experience it for myself. But it was probably one of my favorite rides at Islands of Adventure, probably second to the Spider-Man ride. I'm most looking forward to that. And a little Easter egg for some people, and maybe Kelly knows this, and maybe this has been mentioned before, but if you go over to Velocicoaster, on the 2 pillars, there are 2 raptors, and on top of these pillars, the raptors resemble the dragons that were at the front of the queue, the facade for Dueling Dragons. So Dueling Dragons has already been pretty prominent in the Universal lore overall, but I'm glad that they're finally bringing it to a house, and I'm kind of wondering what they're going to do to make it scary, because the dragons themselves are a little freaky, but how can we make it scary that's going to jump out at you and kind of make your skin crawl?
Yeah, I mean, I'm super excited for this house. I never got to experience either iteration of the ride, whether it be the Harry Potter version or Dueling Dragons itself. But I mean, I don't think I need to be in order to be excited for this house. I mean, dragons, medieval setting, choosing a path, and getting to choose which one you want to side with and hope they win or lose or whatnot. Like, that's so exciting. I think the visuals in this house are going to be stunning. It might be the most beautiful house of the year, to be quite honest. I think they could have some great scares. My only concern, which is the same concern I had with the Chupacabra, was they need to nail the dragons. I'm assuming they're going to hold them until, hold them till near the end or some capacity like that. because I'm sure they're very big and you can't put them throughout the entire house. But whenever we do see them, I think they really need to nail them and make sure they look realistic enough for a Halloween Horror Nights house, so you don't immediately, get out of the experience. Because that was my only problem with Chupacabra. I love the story, I love the villagers, I love the sets, the music, everything was great. Just the only thing I didn't like were the actual Chupacabras, which hurt it a little bit, unfortunately, because that is the focus of the house. So if they can nail the dragons, I think this will. I think this will be great. I'm super excited for this one, and especially for everyone who, like you, Kelly, and Christian, who are super familiar with the lore and everything like that.
I like my mangy Chupies. Yeah, that's going to be a fun one. I hope it's scary too. That's kind of my same question, Christian. But hey, for those of you who are new, if you can carve out 4 runs, you never know. Might get a different experience. That's what they're saying.
Adam is a Chupacabra apologist on this podcast.
See, I love the house. I think the house ended up in my top 3 or 4. I know a lot of people had it very low. It just that's my just one concern is how they actually looked, but I could get over that with everything else that the house excelled at. That house was beautiful. It was a visual masterpiece and had wonderful storytelling.
For sure. So this is the last expansion, the last sequel, and of course you don't need to be super familiar with the old stuff to really enjoy this new stuff. But for this third expansion or sequel, I hope you're ready to be looking for Yeti. Yeti! We have another Yeti house this year, Campground Kills.
I'm kind of indifferent on it. Like I said before, I just rewatched videos all the time of past houses from 28 and 29, and the Yeti Terror of the Yukon house always terrified me, and it was just kind of scary. But I know a lot of people that loved that house, and I know this year, I guess they were saying it's going to be kind of like a comedy house, so I'm intrigued by it, but I don't know. I think it's number 9 on my hype list. That's what I had it at. I'm hoping that changes, but I don't know. I'm kind of indifferent on it, but I know a lot of people that are really excited for the Yeti to come back.
With you saying that this is a comedy house, I kind of hope that they play into the campiness of it. No pun intended, because it's Campground Kills. But I hope that we see just some really silly things. Like, I want to see someone get made into a s'more. Like, I think that would be really funny. And just play into the fun of it. Not everything has to be serious. And I think if they take this the comedy route, it'll be refreshing for people who are familiar to the Yeti character, but in something that feels new and exciting.
Yeah, I feel like I'm hoping this gives the vibes of a silly campy summer camp type slasher, where it's just obviously it won't be those exact vibes, but something like that where it's just silly and fun. I mean, I'm pretty sure I think it was Discovery Universal, they did hint that there's going to be a baby Yeti, and there's going to be a bunch of different ones, and it's also a joke that they're actually Bigfoots and not Yetis. It's just, I think it's going to be a fun time. I love a comedy house. I just always love the comedy houses. I mean, I have Slaughter Cinema as my background here, and I loved Killer Clowns, and I love all of the comedy stuff. So I think I'm gonna have a great time in this house. It was kind of somewhere in the middle of my hype list, just because there's so many things I'm excited about this year. But I definitely think I'm gonna enjoy this one a lot.
I have concerns about this house. I'm very excited. I think that the 50s and the camp, the camp vibe of it is going to be really fun and exciting. I'm worried that it might feel a little too similar to Terror of the Yukon, because I thought Terror of the Yukon, even though it looks like it's going to be more serious than this, did have a lot of funny moments, and I found it just really silly a lot of the time. So I don't want it to feel too similar to that. If they can nail the differences and really go all in on the setting and have a bunch of different types of kills that weren't in Terror of the Yukon, and different types of scares and everything, that I think I can overlook it being, super close to Terror of the Yukon in years. So that's my only concern, but I really hope it surprises me. And I think this has the potential to rise up on my on my actual list quite a bit.
Yeah, I'm kind of in the same camp as all. Oh man, we were actually doing camp puns or camp references just because that's. I didn't try, I swear. Yeah, no, I think it's going to be a fun time and capture that spirit of those old houses. So there, even though we're expanding on some old originals, there's also some brand new originals, and I think this is, for me, I mean, even though I've only been going for 4 years, it's the new originals that I'm finding I get really interested in, not just because, you know, the lore, but just because they offer some really original ideas. They capture the feelings of some of our favorite horror movies. And the first one on that list is The Darkest Steel. To me, I think this is going to be the Dead Man's Pier of this year, where I don't know how much they can do with a tent as far as like how big the scene it can be, but I think from a storyline perspective, it sounds like it's one of the more detailed story houses as you follow this musician who sells his soul to the devil, or as they're calling him in this house, the collector. What other character in this year is also collecting souls but Oddfellow? Listen, if he's confirmed not to be Oddfellow, my headcanon's still going to be Oddfellow's the collector. But you're basically going to be like, the way they described it on the podcast is that you're going to be like a bandmate following this musician and end up in this hellish zone because he sold his soul and all of that. So I think from a storyline perspective, I think that's what a lot of people are looking forward to with this house. Just by the concept alone, I think if this is your first year, you're a casual fan, don't not make time for an original house that sounds as interesting from a story perspective as this one.
Yeah, this one was in my top 5, and I think anything that is in my top 5, especially this year, had the potential to being number 1 hype for like a different year. You know, I mean, they are just some really cool houses, and this is one of them. I think it was the Patreon episode where I was saying that it reminds me of like, I love Mr. Toad's Wild Ride at Disneyland. So like you get to go to like this like hellish place, and I just, even if it's not like campy like that, I just always think that's really interesting, where you get transported to this like area that, you know, feels like you're not supposed to be there, I guess. Like, it's like, wait, no, I can't be here. This is bad. So I just think that's kind of cool that it's like, I love the sold your soul for talent idea and the consequences of that. They always do music really well in houses. So even though blues may not be like a type of music I normally listen to, I think it's going to be super well incorporated and interesting. And I just think this is a phenomenal story. Like, I just can't wait. I wasn't sure what to think of this one when it was first announced, and then as I've learned more about it, it has just rose up on my hype list. Like, I just think it sounds so cool.
What I just keep thinking about is the room in Case Files where we had the live singer. I'm really hoping there's something like that in Darkest Steel, just because it is essentially a music house, and, you know, you're in the band or you're following this band. I don't know. I think the concept is so cool to me. That's how I feel like I'm saying that for all of these, but I feel like this year is like such a strong year that I'm looking forward to every single one. And I think every single one could be, I mean, number 1 is, we'll hear later about what my number 1 is, and I know that's staying there all season. But I mean, it's like, I feel like a lot of these originals are going to be competing for like the 2 or 3 spot, because like, and like listening to the pocket, like the detail and the thought that has gone into it is just mind-blowing.
Yeah, this house is very high on my hype list, very high, which can be can be bad in some cases, you know, depending. I think this is definitely the high concept house of this year in terms of story, where if they get the story right and all the beats hit and there's a great finale, it will end up very high on my list. If the story flops or there's a lot of dead space and it's not told correctly, it will go all the way down. Sort of like Spirits of the Coven, where once again, the story was so important, and when you don't nail it, unfortunately, the house in parts can all of a sudden start to feel a little dull and repetitive. So if they can nail that, then I think it can be a phenomenal house. And I'm really, really happy they are going, you know, shooting for this and really trying to tell a incredibly detailed story in such a limited amount of time in a house format. I think that's really cool.
I think for this one, I would have to say, I really hope that the music shines through. Because with some of the other houses, they are very loud, and the sound effects that are used can kind of drown it out. So I'm hoping that there's a good balance that I can hear the music, because it seems that the story of this will be very influenced by the music. Obviously, it following a blues musician. And I think, maybe you want to tie this into the Weeknd's house last year. The thing is, people are familiar with the Weeknd's music. You may not have heard it that well, considering though it was very, very loud, that you were familiar enough and you kind of knew what you were hearing. Whereas this is going to be completely original. And I really want and hope that I can hear it and follow it. And like Bella had said, I hope that there's a live musician of some sort. I love the performance aspect of it, and I think it would be really great if they incorporate that into this house this year.
Yeah, and there's one more original. That is Blood Moon Dark Offerings. This also has a podcast associated with it. And that's kind of what sold me on this one, because to me, it sounded like a less interesting Fiesta de Chupacabras. And not in that, it's about a chupacabra or some sort of cryptid, but it is about a murderous event happening in a village because of someone's traditions. It's like, I like Chuppy, but I don't know about this one. But then the podcast kind of sold me on it as it reminds me of like The Witch, or a dark version of The Village, the M. Night Shyamalan movie. And so we'll see how it is. I've learned though not to really doubt too many original houses.
Maybe this one will be the standout surprise of them all. And I think a lot of people right now, their first impressions, this might be at the bottom of the list, but there's so many great houses that I don't think there will be a bad one. But I think, unfortunately, at this time, people will put this at the bottom, and I'm really hoping that that's not the case.
Yeah, the story of the podcast was super interesting and definitely helped a lot, because they, like you said, they really give much description on this, and the house description or the podcast itself, it felt like they were kind of running out of time, so they couldn't really talk about it that much. They really only, were describing, it's going to be bloody and gory and all that stuff. And that's not usually my favorite thing about houses. I'm not much of a gore guy, so isn't going to be super high on my list. But I think if they execute it well, especially, it can, have great sets and atmosphere. And I'm excited to see how the moon, plays into the house itself. Like they even said in the podcast that the moon's going to shine like a red glow on everything. So I'm interested to see how that actually looks in person. I think it could be fun. It's low on my list for now because we still don't know that much about it. And I think we know a lot more about the other ones, but this has the potential to rise for me. Absolutely.
That reminds me of a story from Christopher Ripley's book on all the years that have happened at Horror Nights. And the idea with the moon, I don't know if it's going to be like the violinist in Dead Man's Pier, but I do remember there's the moon, they recreated the moon and they rebuilt a set for the people under the stairs in HHN 2, way back in 91, 92, something like that, where people would get so enamored by oh my gosh, is that a real set? Is that a real house? Is that a real moon? That they would then take the scare actors behind them and scare them to keep them going. So if that's like that, and how bloody this is going to be, it could be a really terrifying experience.
Yeah, I think it's going to be really well done based on everything from the podcast. I think it sounds like a really cool concept. Normally, the cult stuff and Jonathan said, the gore especially, it's not usually my favorite thing about a house. I'm not opposed to a house being gory, obviously, but just it's usually not what makes me fall in love with the house. So obviously this is going to be a super gory house, very bloody, probably going to smell very bloody. If you've never been, the houses do have smells associated with them, for better or for worse. So I think it's going to be a house that I enjoy. It probably won't be one of my favorites, but it also could completely surprise me, because I did think that podcast episode was really awesome. And I liked hearing about the backstory. I loved the ending of that episode. So I'm intrigued by this one. It is lower on my hype list right now, but curious to see where it ends up based on the execution.
So, with all the originals out of the way, and as we said before, you might be here for the IP, but definitely make some time to see these originals, because for longtime fans, this is kind of what keeps a lot of us going, even though, gosh, I think I know in our group these IPs are very high on, or our main cast. Like this is like these IPs are high. These are all high for us, and it's hard not to get hyped for them. And we'll hear from you too, Christian and Jonathan. But let's start with the first one, and that is The Last of Us, based on the hit video game. Christian, you've got the Fedra and the Fireflies as your background here on Zoom. I'm going to let you take this.
All right, now where do I start? Well, I will say this is my number one most anticipated house of this year, probably Horror Nights ever, since I started going at HHN 30. I loved The Last of Us playing it through the game. It has one of the most compelling stories that you could probably ever experience in a video game. And probably a lot of people out there are thinking, oh, well, do I really have to play the game? They put the show out on HBO. It's probably the same. But I would say don't follow the show. Now, the show does a great job in itself, and it is definitely worth the watch for anyone. But they're going to be following things from the game, and you're going to want to follow that closely to basically get the whole gist of it. A few things that they pointed out about this is that the game or the house will be taking place in the Pittsburgh area that they explore in the video game. So for those who are unfamiliar, The Last of Us follows the story of Joel Miller and Ellie, and they basically they take Ellie across the country in hopes of finding a cure as the world is plagued from an outbreak. And has started infecting people, where the people have become quote unquote infected. So they'll be exploring the Pittsburgh area. This will be the setting for the house. I think this will be great. I think there's a lot of landmarks in Pittsburgh that I think they'll be able to pinpoint and have people follow. I think the most important part of this is that when the HHN team was working on this house, they worked with Neil Druckmann and Naughty Dog directly so that we will get the best adaptation of this house. So for those of you who are unfamiliar, Neil Druckmann is the creator of The Last of Us, and has pretty much become the lead in anything at the Naughty Dog publishing company. Like I said, back to how this is part of the game. In the show, they don't quite follow the weapon tables, and the weapon tables are very important to the game. They are essentially workbenches where you can upgrade your weapons. So in the game, you get things such as pistols, molotovs, shivs, bows and arrows, rifles, and they're somehow going to be in this house. I don't know in what way. I mean, they're most definitely just going to be props, but I wonder how they'll contribute to this house. They've also said that there are masks for the clickers and bloaters that are identical to the game. So any of you who are not familiar with the game, there's the general infected. Most often those are referred to as runners, and they're just what they sound like. They run. The clickers are another group of infected, and the clickers have become infected to the point where the fungus growing on them surrounds their head and their eyes, so the infected can actually no longer see. So they essentially use echolocation, kind of like what dolphins use, to find their surroundings. So when you play this part of the game and there's the infected, you have to work very stealthily. Very rarely do I ever see people try to go guns blazing through this part of the game, because it does not end well. It does not end well. The third group, the bloaters, these are, again, just what they sound like. They are just people who have become bloated through the infection, through the fungus, and they're very tough. They're almost like armored, essentially. So they're very hard to kill. In the game, the best way to actually take them out is with molotovs, because they're weak to the fire. So I'm kind of hoping that when we see that, we see a lot of how you would play through the game, especially with like the clickers. So the best way to navigate through the clickers is using the bricks or glass bottles. You kind of throw them and they create a distraction so that you can, weave your way around them. So I'm hoping that they incorporate how you should fight these infected in the house so that it feels like you're playing that. So that I hope they just get that story right because you want to follow the game the way it is. Oh, and going back to how I said that this is about the game. So very thankful for Pedro Pascal and Bella Ramsey contributing their efforts and everyone else that was a part of the HBO Last of Us series. But they'll be following the actors and actresses that were portraying the characters in the game, so they won't quite look like they did in the show. So, you know, if one of the characters looks a little off that you may have seen in the show, don't fret. That's because they're not following the show. They're going to be following the game. And probably most importantly, or maybe not most importantly, but what I'm most excited for is that the actors, Joel, who's played by Troy Baker, and Ellie, who is played by Ashley Johnson, they're actually reprising their roles, and they have recorded new dialogue for this house. And I am most excited for that because we did see them in the Last of Us HBO series. They did have their own part, and it was so nice to get to hear their voices again. But they have not touched this game since the Last of Us Part 2 series actually came out. So I'm really excited to have them back. I'm really hoping that if this takes off and we see the success of this, that they go to The Last of Us Part 2. Now, I think The Last of Us Part 2 could be a little bit complicated for some other reasons, but I'm so excited for this, especially in the way that a lot of people are going to love the quote-unquote zombie aspect of it, but this is in no way a zombie house. This is not The Walking Dead. This is not, you know, any other sort of stereotypical zombie story that you could think of. It's really intense, and I'm really excited for this one.
Yeah, Christian, you totally nailed it with that. I completely agree. One thing I'll just add to jump on the end of that is exactly what you said. If you haven't played this game and you're like, oh, I've seen the show, so I'm good, definitely try to experience this game in some way. If you enjoy video games and that type of video game, I think definitely try to play it beforehand or throughout the season. I know that it's not my type of game to play, but after watching the show and learning about it, I'm so interested in, like, I want to know everything about it. I just think it's really cool. I've seen some clips and I think the voice actors are incredible and the story's incredible. So me personally, I know that I will be watching some walkthroughs, which are definitely available on YouTube. It's a pretty popular game, so you should definitely be able to find stuff like that with your preference of, with people talking or without. But I'm super excited to experience this in this kind of way. And I think that it's really great when they do houses that are based on video games, because they've only done a few of them, and I really want to see that trend continue because I think it's really cool.
Yeah, and I just think that this house is going to be so pretty. Like, it's going to be gorgeous, because we've seen the food booth that popped up in the park, and it looks, I mean, it's the best looking food booth I think I've ever seen. The one in New York for Last of Us is it's beautiful. But also the one that appeared in Taste the Terror that's happening right now. And they did not need to go that hard. There was like that they had a clicker over there, which was nice, but they had even like a little detail saying all the stages of the infected. That was exactly from the game. And that, collaboration with Naughty Dog and then making sure that everything is, exactly from the game or as accurate as it can possibly be, makes me really excited for this. And I think it's going to be a great time. And I think it might be one of the scariest and one of the most beautiful houses this year.
Right on. I'm more hyped after hearing y'all talk about it, for sure. I hope they get the story right and make sure that that emotion kind of comes through.
Yes. And one thing I will add, for those who are a major change that they made between the show and the game is that the best way that they could portray the possibility of infection was that in the game, infection can be airborne. So there's a lot of the threat of breathing in the spores. So in a lot of sessions, you have to go in with a gas mask to prevent yourself from breathing in anything. Now in the show, they changed it to tendrils because the visual aspect is a lot easier to see on screen, and I think will play in some parts when they explore season 2 and beyond of the show. But I'm hoping that they also do follow the spores being airborne. I think that's an important part especially in part 2, which again, if we see that house in the future, that'll definitely play a significant role.
Yeah, as someone who's never played the game or watched the show, I'm excited to start like looking into things. I have a couple walkthroughs saved. I'm gonna try and hit the show regardless. So I'm excited. I mean, Christian, you have loved this game for as long as I've known you. So I'm just like preparing to have to drag you out of that house whenever we go together at the end of the night.
Well, I have my trusty little Joel Miller pop figure watching over me. So
So Jonathan, is there a house of any of these IP that you're like really chomping at the bit about?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's one that was actually the first announcement, technically, of this year. And that's Chucky, Chucky Ultimate Kill Count. My favorite houses every year have always been IP originals, every single year without fail. And this is exactly what that is. I mean, they've said it straight up that, yeah, you know, it's supposed to be based on the show, but then Chucky comes in and just starts messing with things, including possessing people working for the house, which is really exciting. Like, imagine seeing ops that usually guide you all of a sudden try to kill you, as you're walking through. I think it's such a great idea. I love the Chucky character. I think they can do a lot with this house. Yeah, I mean, I've talked about it a ton, but I think this is such a wonderful idea that they can not only celebrate the character of Chucky, but also make fun of HHN along the way. That's such a cool meta concept. I mean, over in Hollywood, John Murdy, like, these houses, once again, are not 100% similar, but they do share same concepts. One of the things he said for his Hollywood house is that someone asked, like, hey, is Chucky gonna curse? Because that's what kind of Chucky's known for. And John Murdy said, well, he'll try, but then the theme park censors him, and that makes him very, I don't know what word I can say here, so I'm just going to say very mad.
You can say whatever you want.
Makes him pissed off, basically, which is great. Imagine Chucky trying and then getting bleeped and just getting more and more mad. I think that is so clever. I can't wait for this house. It's definitely my most hyped IP, possibly my most hyped house of this year. I think it's going to be really great if they can pull off this meta concept.
Yeah, we're on the same page with that for sure. I love the Chucky series. I just rewatched everything from the first Child's Play, and they're just so good. It's one of my favorite, if not my favorites, like slashers and horror franchises. So I'm stoked about this house. I think it's going to be fun. I did not hear that about what Murdy said about the Hollywood one, so I hope we get something like that too, because that sounds hilarious. And I think it's just going to be a lot of Chuckies, which I think is going to be a great time.
I have definitely not been shy about my dislike for Chucky. I literally said, I've said this in other episodes, but the night before that they announced the Chucky house last year, I was talking to my friend in front of his food booth saying, I wish I could punt that doll out of like the area. Like I can't do Chucky. And then of course they announced the house. So I've just been like dreading it and dreading it and dreading it. And now I'm like hearing like what this house is about and how funny it's going to be. And I'm like, maybe this is going to sneak up on me. Maybe I'm going to end up liking that little scary demon doll. I don't know. I'm excited. It's at like number 6 on my hype list, but I don't know. I know everyone loves Chucky, but maybe this will change my mind.
The house hops already find a way to scare me when they're standing in a corner. So I'm not looking forward to the fact that they'll actually be playing a role in this. And I feel like for that reason, I'm going to probably get scared the best out of this house, just because I don't anticipate it like I do some others.
So Kelly and Jonathan, to me, you're kind of like our Chucky experts. What do you think? What do you think people should marathon, if they should marathon? Because like the meta concept is really cool. I think that's attractive to anyone. But what would you say? What do you think?
Oh God, I mean, I love this franchise so much, but they are not nice to people who have not caught up on everything, unfortunately. I say everything. As weird as that sounds, watch every movie, and then Child's Play 1, 2, 3, Bride of Chucky, Seed of Chucky. Then you got Curse of Chucky, Cult of Chucky. And then you got the TV show. I say if you really want to get everything you can out of this house, at least this is how, according it is to the show, you need to watch everything and digest all of this information, because it's all important. I mean, Glenn and Glenna was a character introduced in Seed of Chucky, one of the franchise's probably most hated movies, but it's still very important. It plays a part. Seems like they're going to cover everything in some. I mean, the show does. The show covers everything in some capacity. So I recommend watching everything because it's just a good time. You can't have. You'll always have fun with the Chucky movie. Even the bad ones are still. I mean, Chucky's great, and there's always something to look forward to.
Yeah, I completely agree with everything. That's just the only way to do it. Now, I did tell Bella, because I know she doesn't want to watch them all, you can listen to, like, I think it was Dead Meat Kill Counts has like which I have not listened to this, but they do like a recap of everything. So you can do that and just watch season 1 and 2 of the show, because the house is going to be based on I believe both seasons, season 1 and 2, and then it's going to be kind of the meta concept of going through that haunted house. So I think you definitely want to watch the show, but they do a good job in the show of referencing things back. But again, like Jonathan said, they are not kind to you if you have not seen the show, because they will just throw things in there. I think you really have to watch all the movies. You can skip the 2019 Mark Hamill remake one, probably, where it's like maybe they'll make fun of it, but you could probably skip that one.
They make fun of that. That would be amazing. That'd be wonderful.
I would love that.
I did love that movie, but it has nothing related to this version of Chucky at all. It's his completely own thing.
For sure. And it's really fun, and there's great acting and stuff. And I love Mark Hamill. I mean, I love Brad Dourif as well. The normal voice of Chucky, like for the series, but it's a great movie. You should just watch that too anyway, because I love everything Chucky related. But yeah, technically it probably won't be a part of it since it's not in like the canon lore. But again, if they made fun of it, it'd be kind of cool, because with that one, they kind of went a little in a different direction, and it was more based on like technology taking over versus like a possession, which if you don't know anything about Chucky, you are in for a treat with these movies, because there's so much involved in them, and they're so fun, and they're all, or at least like, the first 3 are very different from the next 2, and the show is very different. And I think the show is one of the best things that they've made. But you really only appreciate it if you're like in it. So yeah, I would watch as much as you can and at least get interested in the show. I will say season 1 is on Peacock. Season 2 can be a little bit hard. And if you bought Halloween Horror Nights Frequent Fear, or maybe some of the regular tickets as well, you might have Peacock 6 months included, which is cool. It's how I watched it again. Or My Library had it to rent out as well, which is an option. Try to find it and watch both seasons if you can, as well as everything else before you get there, because I think you're going to enjoy it the most that way.
Yeah, when we say, or when y'all are saying, but I would agree, because I'm getting into Chucky now, and y'all are like the super fans, but I'm definitely a fan. These movies are like, most of them are like 80-ish minutes long. The longest one is 96 minutes long, so you could probably watch like 3 in an afternoon if you wanted to, or have a pizza party with some friends, or watch one as you're going into the because this episode's coming out right before Horror Nights, so maybe you don't have time if this is the first you're hearing that there's a Chucky house. I'm honored that Theme Park Workshop was the first voice you heard about that. It's been around since the last Horror Nights, but either way, there's definitely time to catch up on it, and it should be well worth it. Bella.
Yes?
Go crazy.
Okay. What's that one TikTok audio that's like, thanks for asking, because I've been dying to talk about it for a hot minute. Okay. So Stranger Things Volume 4 is coming, and this will be my first year experiencing a Stranger Things house, and I could literally cry right now thinking about it, because I'm so excited. I just started my rewatch of Volume 4, and I'm sure 97% of people that are like going to Horror Nights know Stranger Things and know this season. But if you don't, I'm going to give you a little too long, didn't read, or those things. But so we open in Hawkins. We have the Hawkins crew, and then we also have the California crew, because at the end of 3, Elle, Will, and Joyce went to California. And so we have the California crew, we have the Hawkins crew, but as we know, our Lord and Savior Hopper did not die at the end of season 3. So, but he's in Russia. So that's kind of a sucky situation. And we are, greeted with our same kids and Elle, and she still doesn't have her powers. But then we meet Eddie Munson, who is part of the Hellfire Club, which is like this D&D club, which I think it's really cool because it kind of like ties in the OG season, how they're playing D&D, and now there's that. I just think it's cool. But then there's Chrissy, and this is how the house is supposed to start. Chrissy, well, what they've said. Chrissy, she goes to Eddie Munson to buy drugs because she's been having these really intense visions and headaches, and her nose is bleeding, and she doesn't know why. So she's like, drugs are the answer. So she goes to Eddie Munson and gets drugs. And then they end up going back to his trailer park, and shit goes down. In the air, she's crooked, she's broken, and then she dies, essentially. And I have a Snapchat video of me saying I like screaming at like 1 a.m, begging for this to be in a Horror Nights house. So you're all welcome. Then we're like, oh my God, what is happening? We find out that Max has been having visions as well because she's going to the school counselor. Christy was also going to the counselor. And then we also see this other character, Fred. He's also going to the counselor, but he also gets Vecna'd. But I don't think he's going to be in the house, so you don't really need to worry about him. So we're with the Hawkins gang, with Steve, Nancy, Maya. That's her real name. You know who I mean.
Robin.
Robin. Yep. Sorry,
my wife.
I'm like very overstimulated right now talking about this because I'm so excited. So they're trying to figure out what the heck is going on with Max because, in the Dear Billy episode, we get the greatest thing that's ever shown on television ever in the world. The running up that hill sequence. I'm so excited. I'm so sorry.
This is like Spark Notes, like, hey, you guys watched Stranger Things season 4 so long ago. This is your update you need. You don't even need to watch it again.
No, let me stumble my way through it. And Dear Billy, that whole episode where Max comes face to face with Vecna, we kind of see more of his world and his lair, and she escaped because then we learn about the music. So I'm really hoping that running up that hill is being pumped through that house a lot because it is going to be focusing more on Vecna, but also with the California crew, Elle gets in a lot of trouble because she beat up Angela with her skate. But then she gets taken by the government back to Dr. Brenner because they can get her powers back. Girl,
You should put a spoiler warning in.
Oh, sorry.
Tell people when
Spoilers.
to skip to, Adam.
Sorry.
The beginning.
He dies. But she has her powers back. So now they're trying to team up. We got the team in the Upside Down now trying to communicate. There's so much going on. My brain is exploding. We find out. Spoilers. Spoiler warning. We find out that Vecna, who is actually one in when Elle is being tested on, wait, have you not watched Stranger Things?
No, I have. I love how much passion you have with this. It makes me happy.
Oh my God. My heart just like stopped because you guys look so worried. Okay.
No, I've seen it.
We find out that Vecna is one. Oh my God. And he orchestrated everything. He made the Upside Down. He made the Mind Flayer. He did all this. And now Hawkins is ripped in 2. So...
Well, actually, I think Hawkins is ripped in 4.
It's ripped in 4. Thank you. It went twice. Also, Metallica, Eddie Munson, Demobats, Master of Puppets, and then crying. But yeah, the main things you need to know is that Vecna, he's a mastermind. He did all this, but also 11 kind of did all of it too, kind of. Yeah, that was a really horrible run through. But it's because I'm so excited. Everything I wrote down and everything that's in my head, because I'm so excited. But
the music is such an iconic part of the season. God, we hope it makes it through. Vecna is such an iconic part of the season, and we're following him, right?
Yes, it's basically like the curse of Vecna. You're just like kind of following him through. So I really don't know if we're gonna see Hopper very much. Because also Joyce and Murray, they go to Russia to try to get Hopper back. Plot twist, they also go to a Russian camp and they're trying to get him out. There's this big old Demogorgon person dog looking thing. Hopper kills it with a sword, like with an amazing remix of Separate Ways. Anyway,
which is on
Yeah.
Spotify, and it's great.
Which is on Spotify.
I think I need someone, like, I need to reach out to an artist that likes Taylor Swift and Stranger Things to have like Vecna drawn with like the bejeweled bodysuit that says "You knew I was a mastermind" and put it on a t-shirt, because I would wear that.
Oh my God. Because I came up with my Eddie Munson fit last night, and I'm excited. But yeah, so it's going to be following Vecna, like I've said 17 million times. And probably just about how, you know, he's getting into these kids' minds, like Max and Chrissy, R.I.P., and Fred. Oh, and there's that other kid from the basketball team. Him too. Yeah.
There's a lot of opportunity for kills, I'm guessing.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think it's going to be very scary because Vecna is kind of scary, and going to be lots of different versions of Demogorgons. We're probably going to see the standard one. We're going to see the Demodogs, probably the Demobats. We're probably going to see the Mind Flayer because, spoiler alert, we see it at the end of season 4, volume 2. The bitch is coming back to Hawkins. It's going to be very crazy. I think it's going to be very beautiful because I thought that his little upside down, you know, his like version, I thought it was kind of pretty with all like the vines and the purple and the red. I think the visuals are just going to be nuts. And I think I'm going to have several out of body experiences walking through. I will cry.
So I'm trying to remember, Adam, have you done any Stranger Things houses before?
I did Stranger Things 2.
/3.
Yeah.
Okay.
I wish that was me.
That one was fine.
Yeah, but the atmosphere, and to go more into Bella's point before we move on, is that these houses are so immersive and they are so atmospheric, and that's something that's really attractive about all of them. Even one that was not the best of its year in Stranger Things 2/3, there is still that feeling, and I don't see how they can botch Stranger Things 4 with all the strength of the season that Bella has told us about. Yeah.
I really hope that, because I've watched the Stranger Things, both those houses, the videos religiously. I really hope that we do see the big Mind Flayer puppet, or we see some type of puppetry in this house. Because HHN and puppets, like, I feel like they go so well together, and they've done it so well over the few years I've gone. So I'm very interested to see what kind of puppets we get in there, because I feel it in my soul. But I'm excited. I'm excited to see all my favorite characters right in front of my eyeballs. This is all I wanted to do. And Christian knows. I cannot wait. I can't wait.
Yeah. I really enjoyed the first two, especially the first one. I mean, going through that was definitely like a really amazing experience for me, and I'm excited. I think the characters and being in those settings is like the best part. I wanted to hear from Jonathan and then Christian if you've done the other Stranger Things houses, kind of what you thought, and if you're excited for this one.
Just like Bella, this is going to be my first ever Stranger Things house. I unfortunately did not have the chance to go any of the prior years. I'm definitely going to be looking forward to this house. I think with how big season 4 was, I'm just trying to wrap my head around how we can fit everything inside this house. So I think with the whole Curse of Vecna storyline, I think we'll be spending a lot of time in the Upside Down, which personally I'm most excited about anyways. I think a lot of the most interesting creative things kind of happen in this alternate reality world that I think will just be the best part of the whole house. I hope there's plenty of clocks and ticking that makes me want to rip my hair out and all, but I'm just really anticipating this house, especially since I didn't have a chance to do it in any prior years. I'm excited to see all the characters. I'm excited to see Vecna himself, which if they nail the look for Vecna, I think that'll be one of the most impressive things that they'll do at Horror Nights this year.
I mean, absolutely. If they can get Vecna right, whoo, that is going to be scary and super, big and just imposing. It's going to be great. But in reference to in the past Stranger Things I experienced both in Orlando. I thought Stranger Things 1 is still one of the most beautiful houses I've ever seen. Super accurate to the show. It had rooms that just had my jaw like just drop to the floor. They were so accurate and beautiful. I didn't get too scared. I only had one time going through. So I think I got a bad run, but it still looked very pretty, had great atmosphere and sound, and I loved it. It was great. Season 2 and 3, not as pretty, not as scary. It had a lot of problems. I still liked it. But I think it relied too heavily on mannequins that honestly took you immediately out of the experience right away. And that really hurt. And the transitions were not as nice and fluid as they were in Stranger Things 1 were. In that house, everything was connected to the Upside Down. And that's how all the transitions happened. It was a great way to connect everything and ground everything. Season 2 and 3, they kind of just were like, you're in the bathroom, now you're in an arcade, because who cares? There you go. They didn't really work too hard with the transitions there. So, that was the problem with 2 and 3, but I still liked it. And I think season 4 could have the best of both worlds. I think they have you can ground it in a way that if we're just following Vecna's story, that makes things a lot easier instead of jumping all the way to Russia and then jumping all the way to California. Like, if we sort of just follow the storyline of Vecna, makes things a lot easier and a lot less complicated. I think it has the scares, like you were saying, Bella, with all the types of creatures they could have. I'd love to see the demo dogs make a return, but in a better way than 2 and 3. I'd like for them to actually be scary. I love that. I'd love to see Demogorgons come back and Vecna and the bats. I want to see how they do the bats. They're obviously going to be a prominent role. They're in the shirts and stuff, so I'm sure they're planning on doing something interesting with them, which is going to be cool. So yeah, if they can ground it, make it scary, nail the transitions, I think it's going to be a solid house. It's not super high on my hype list because I have worries from experiencing 2 and 3. But regardless, I think it's going to be fun. And I think the sound design alone, if they can throw in, I mean, it's been rumored for a while on the forums and stuff that songs that are very prominent to the season are going to be featured. And if that's the case and it's true, it's going to be a crazy experience. They're going to have scenes that are going to knock our socks off. So I'm super excited.
What I really find, like, kind of like you said, Vecna's storyline was kind of the most interesting. It was definitely more prominent in the second half, especially with finding out, like, One and his childhood at the Creel house and doing all this, and then Victor Creel. I feel like it's definitely the better way to go. I feel like it would be kind of a mess if they were going to include a lot of Hawkins or a lot of California or a lot of Russia. Obviously, there's key scenes in each location, like in Russia, the one where Hopper, Joyce, and Murray are fighting those creatures over there. We have the running up that hill sequence in Hawkins, and then the entire ending in Hawkins. And then in California, we have Elle, getting her powers back, that whole kind of not like war, but like that shootout type of thing with Brenner and the helicopter and all of that. So I'm just, I don't think obviously I can express how excited I am, but I do have my concerns with 2 and 3. I am a little nervous that since I am very, 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 very hyped for it, that I don't want to be let down. But I don't know. I think just hearing that theme music, the iconic theme music alone, is going to make me ascend and fall to the ground. So regardless, I'm pumped.
Yeah, I mean, that first house, they built up to that theme too. You had the intro, and then you immediately enter a dark room, and then you see the show title crawl like on a big projector, and they blasted that theme in there. It was surrounding you. And it's like, all right, Stranger Things is here at Horror Nights. Get ready. And I hope they do something similar with this house, because yeah, hearing that theme and the music, that iconic music, is something that you know in a Horror Nights house is something that is really special.
Yeah, and if you think I'm annoying now, just wait until we get Scream. It'll be worse.
And I really hope we do get it soon.
Move in. I'll move in.
You will. Adam, I know that there's a house on here that you're quite excited to talk about.
I know. But I want to end on a high. Who's looking forward to The Exorcist Believer?
Just chirping in the background.
No comment.
I have a sound machine, but the sound never comes through, and the crickets would have been perfect.
I'll put it in post.
They didn't. Yeah.
But I do want to make a case for it, because I thought of a case today, because I had a 3-day weekend. So what else am I going to think about but Horror Nights? So if we look back, and I'm not going to be long about this because the movie's not out. I think that's killing some of the hype. David Gordon Green and his crew, they did the Halloween sequel trilogy that just came out. And I think the response to that has been mixed. I'm personally mixed on it too, so I'm not giving a lot of confidence with this. Exorcist is not known for having great sequels, so again, it's really just that one classic. But I think it still kind of ties into the whole themes of things, right? So if we go back to the opening scene of the movie, we discover this ancient evil of Pazuzu, who has existed for a long time, and then he takes, his reign of terror happens in the 70s with Reagan and the priest and everything, and now he's back and he's kind of fighting old foes with Chris McNeil and all that. She's the mom in the first Exorcist movie, so kind of like Dr. Oddfellow, he's been this evil force that has existed for decades now, kind of pulling the strings behind the scenes. Pazuzu is kind of like the Oddfellow in this case. It's very loose, but I think it still kind of works with that theme of like working in the shadows and, working in the shadows for a long time and being this ancient evil. That's still a thing, and these dark powers. And still, talking about the and on the podcast, you're kind of going to see it from the perspective of the demons from hell. I guess kind of like Vecna. So you probably won't be spoiled for the movie if that's something you're worried about. So, I liked last year's Blumhouse house, so maybe this Blumhouse house will still be, woohoo. But we will see.
I love the glass half full approach you have about connecting it to sort of Oddfellow in a way. I think that's really clever. I like that thought process. But in terms of like my thoughts on this, I think it could be a house that rises really, I'm pretty sure almost everyone has this at the bottom. Like almost every single list I've seen, the Exorcist believer is at the bottom, and for good reason. Nobody knows what's in it. You can't, besides the trailer that doesn't look that great, and the press screenings that weren't that great. They're just releasing the movie because I'm sure there's strikes, writer strikes, and and actor strikes, and they're just like, you know what, instead of just waiting to redo it, let's push it out. Let's just let us get it done, which is so fair. But I do think it has some potential. One, it not being the original that was rumored for a while, I think is a benefit rather than a detriment, because the original, you can't do anything else with it. You can't. It's just the bedroom and the bedroom and the bedroom, and then you're done. That's all you get. And that's fun the first time, but if you do it again, it's going to be quite boring. So I'm happy they're doing a sequel, and they're going to go in completely different locations. They're going to do a lot of things. I don't think that trailer showed one bedroom. It might have showed like one little scene of a bedroom, but it doesn't look like it's going to be that prominent, which is great. And the thing that's exciting me the most is that the podcast hinted that we're not just going to be in the real world. We're not just going to be, watching the exorcisms happen and everything like that. They said we're going to move into the demon world, or I assume their minds, sort of like how I interpreted Hollywood's Exorcist. You sort of went into Reagan's mind and saw the battle between her and Pazuzu, in her head. So I assume we're going to do something similar to that, and that excites me a lot. I think that is an original way of making this fresh and unique. I mean, granted, the movie could do that and it might not technically be original, but we won't know. And there's no way to know until October 13th. So I'm going to say it's like an original take on it. And I think that's exciting. I think it's fun. And I think this house can surprise a lot of people if it's done right. So yeah.
I think this is going to be a really scary house. At least, I mean, I hope so. Blumhouse houses have been hit or miss for me. I either really enjoyed them or they were not my favorite. I'm looking at you, The Purge. But I think it's going to be interesting. I am kind of excited for, I'm hoping that opening weekend, maybe on that Saturday, I can go watch the movie at the Cinemark at Universal City Walk, and maybe there will be other people with Horror Night shirts on, and then go do the house that night or something. So that's what I'm hoping for. I think it's going to be kind of cool to see what people think of it before and after the movie comes out, if their opinions change for better or for worse. I've never seen the original Exorcist. I may try to make that happen. Some of you may know that I have a phobia involving vomit that is pretty intense. So naturally it's not up there. Yes, I did brave that for Chucky for the new season, and I do want to read the book as well for The Exorcist, but I'm gonna try to get into it, but it's just not one of my franchises. So I never did the original house because there was a vomit mattress room, and I was like, I don't need to do that. So I'm hopeful that they won't have that kind of thing in this house, but we'll see.
I'm with you, Kelly. I haven't seen Exorcist either, so there's a lot of homework that needs to be done on this one. And again, I think I'm hoping that with the house tying into the movie and the movie not being released until about the middle of October, I'm hoping that I'll understand enough just from the house itself, and that there's not a lot of stories to tie into, and hopefully we'll kind of see that expanded on in the movie.
Yeah, Exorcist has always been on my do not watch these horror movies list because you will cry. But I guess it's an older movie, so how scary can it be? I don't know. I've just always been really nervous about it. And all the houses that they've ever done of Exorcist I've watched, and I was very scared even just watching them on my phone. So I'm hoping this one is fine. I'm gonna try and do as minimal watching as I can because I don't want to know anything about Exorcist. I don't care. I'm scared of it. Maybe that will change as the season goes on, but I'm very scared of it. And this will probably be the one house where I'm not in my brave era and I won't look. This might be the one where I have to we do it later in opening night, so videos are up on YouTube so I could watch and decide.
I think this will be your Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Stop! Not the Texas Chainsaw. Jonathan.
Hopefully there won't be chainsaws in it.
I have a very big fear of chainsaws, so the event was really fun. My first time, with all the chainsaws, the zone. The house, I didn't do the house until the last time. I was holding on to Christian in that house, sobbing. It was terrible. And so I don't think there would be a chainsaw in Exorcist, but
you never know. You never know.
They might know I'm coming and they'll put one in there. So,
but yeah, as I said, I want to end on a high. And to me, there can be few greater highs than Universal Monsters Unmasked. This is going to be my special interest. This is based on some of our B-tier Universal Monsters, the Phantom of the Opera, the Hunchback of Notre Dame, and I don't know why I gave that an accent. That was in French. Hunchback of Notre Dame, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, and the Invisible Man, who's not been in an Orlando house yet. That's very exciting. I say B tier because I know everyone knows Frankenstein. Everyone knows Dracula. People cheer for the Creature of the Black Lagoon, but the Mummy, the Wolfman, these are our A-listers. And so now our less represented monsters kind of get a showcase. The Invisible Man and Dr. Jekyll / Mr. Hyde are on the run and they end up in Paris. Who else is in Paris but the Hunchback and the Phantom? And things go down in Paris. They said there's going to be a lot of knives in this, but I love this. And in the past, I've teased that I don't think Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde really belong in here because what Universal Monsters movie did they have? And I've learned this weekend how wrong I was because Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, you could make the case, are the original Universal Monsters. In 1913, there's a 25-minute silent film that the precursor to Universal Studios put out. So how about that? And of course, there's the Hunchback of Notre Dame film starring Lon Chaney Sr., classic Man of a Thousand Faces. If you've been to the Universal Orlando Horror Makeup Show, they show a lot of him because he did such great practical makeup effects and made very terrifying movies, or iconic movies really, with Hunchback and with Phantom and with some of the others. Phantom was another silent movie that came out in 1925, and that's been a long time classic of horror cinema. And then of course The Invisible Man, 1933, directed by James Whale, who did the original Frankenstein and then The Bride of Frankenstein. I don't think anyone does Universal monster movies quite like him. I watched The Invisible Man last night. It's got this dark comedy sense to it. It's so good. It's so much fun, and it's dark and it's creepy, but it's also like really fun, and that's what I love about the monsters. Now, I don't know, like with Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde and with the Phantom, I don't know which take they're going to do of them, because there are two Phantom of the Opera movies, one from the 40s and one from the 20s. I'm thinking they're going to do the one from the 20s, like the Eric character, as opposed to, I forget the guy's name of the 40s movie. That's strangely one of the more like marketed ones by Universal, played by the guy who did play the Invisible Man. And the only reason I say that is because they went with Karis for Universal Monsters, who's like the second mummy, who had more movies, but I think more people know Imhotep. So are they going to do with the newer version, 40s, the newer version, or are they going to do the older version? And then with Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, you had the 1913 movie, but you also had Abbott and Costello meet Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, which is just like a funny Universal Monsters movie with Karloff, Boris Karloff. If you don't know Karloff, he's Frankenstein's monster. He is also the original Imhotep and the 1932 Mummy, so obviously a classic there. And at the end of that movie, he says to his ward who he wants to marry. It's very creepy in a comedy, but nevertheless, we will go to Paris tonight. So, maybe things went wrong there, and this is actually the long-awaited sequel to Abbott and Costello meet Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. I've loved every Universal Monsters house that there's been. These are all of them are in my top 5. There's Universal Monsters, The Bride of Frankenstein Lives, Legends Collide, and even Legends Collide, which was a concept I wasn't totally sold on at first. The house was one of my favorites it was my favorite last year, up there with Bugs. And then, of course, Hollywood's been doing one every year, even longer. They had Frankenstein and the Wolfman house as well. So I'm always excited for these. I'm a big fan of this franchise and what it means and what these monsters represent, and like how they're all likable, but they're scary and they are monsters. But there's just something about them. There's just something about them and how people can see themselves in them. And of course, like a lot of the IP this year, queer horror. Always fun to see. So I'm looking forward to this. They haven't gone wrong once. I don't think this is going to be their one flop. And Invisible Man, I kind of skimmed over him, I think, but he's had a series of movies. I haven't watched all of those, but I'm really excited to see what they do with him this year, whether it's going to be a lot of dark hallways or not. And even the Phantom and the Hunchback sections of the 2019 house were some of the most iconic for me. So I'm definitely very excited to see where it goes. I yield the floor.
Yeah, I know this is like one of your favorite things, Adam. I'm super excited. I've also absolutely loved the Monsters house. I loved the 2019 one and everything they've done after that. So I'm stoked for this. I do think you bring up a good point about the horror makeup show. If you haven't seen that, or if you haven't seen it in a while, if you have a Scream early ticket, or you're doing the parks earlier in the day or a different day on your trip, definitely try to watch that show, because they talk a lot about like the practical effects that they use and everything with some of the monsters, mostly the A-roll, but they do talk about Phantom and everything. So yeah, definitely check that out, because it's a cool show and I love it. But yeah, I think this is going to be an incredible house. I think it's going to be immersive. I think it's going to be gorgeous. Based on the 2019 house, I think it is going to be just absolutely insane and scary and fun and awesome. And I want to know how they're doing the Invisible Man. Like, is it going to be funny, or is it going to be absolutely dark and horrifying? I don't know, but I think it's going to be great.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree. I am very happy that they're going with these lesser known monsters. I love Legends Collide. It was very fun. But one of my biggest complaints was that they were all A-listers. I kind of just wanted Mummy to have his solo house, but instead we also had to fill it with Dracula and the Wolfman, which is cool. But we've seen them before. A lot of these monsters we haven't seen in a large capacity. As big as this, and some we haven't seen at all, like Jekyll and Hyde and the Invisible Man at Horror Nights, and that is really exciting. I am worried that they're stuffing a little bit too much into this house, because with Universal Monsters 2019, that was okay because it had no story. It did, but not really, and it was just sort of let's go through the let's go through the monsters, and at the end we'll have them all fight you in the end. This one, they're teasing a story about Jekyll and Hyde and Invisible Man running and heading to Paris from, because no one likes them, obviously. And obviously Phantom and Hunchback are kind of already in Paris, so it all kind of works, and they're all hiding under the catacombs, and we're walking in to their home, and they don't like that. They don't like that one bit. I wouldn't either. I don't want someone walking into my home. So I hope the story can come across well. I hope it isn't too filled with monsters. And the only monster that I'm concerned with, and I hate that I'm concerned with it, because I think if it's executed well, it can be fantastic, is the Invisible Man. Because if you look at that that concept art, or not that just the art looks beautiful. You got the Jekyll and Hyde and Phantom and Hunchback right there. They're all evil. They have this disgusting look, and they're super Horror Nightsified. And then right on the right, you kind of just got Invisible Man, just looking exactly the same, just kind of standing there. And it's like, listen, that's funny, but it also does not fit at all with these other monsters. So I hope he doesn't, like, his section, if they do it like that, like, doesn't break the house or like just completely destroy the tone. And it's just like, you have all these scary parts, and it's like, oh, here's the Invisible Man fun part. Here we go. And then you jump back into, I don't know, Phantom killing people or something. I don't know. So that's my only concern. But the Universal Monsters houses have not failed. And they've all been, good to great. And I am excited of this one. I'm very happy that they are going this route instead of just doing another Dracula. This is definitely the better approach.
Not a vampire in sight. They're all over in Vamp.
Exactly.
I'm excited for this one. I didn't get to do the iconic 2019 Universal Monsters house, but I did get to do Brides, and I did Legends Collide, I think, twice last year. I've always had a good time in those houses. Christian and I have some fun memories in the Bride house with that double scare or that triple scare, whatever one it was. But
and don't forget the swinging scare.
Oh, the bungee scare. I'm excited.
I hope there's more bungee scares, especially in this one. I love those.
There's so much opportunity for it in this one, man. Oh, yeah.
If the Phantom is not swinging down around me, there's going to be a problem. But I'm excited. These houses have always been really pretty and like really well themed. So I'm pumped. The scares are always good. So I can't wait.
Yeah, I think it's time for these B-list monsters to have their moment and be in the spotlight and shine. And I just really hope that Universal does them justice like they did the A-listers.
So just to recap this wonderful episode, I've been so happy to have y'all join us, Christian and Jonathan, and of course Kelly and Bella. You're always here. Love having you. And myself, I'm also here. But just to recap, for your prep, expect to have fun, expect to be scared, expect surprises galore. Take in these scare zones that you see. There's going to be so much storyline packed into them, and make connections with the characters where you can, of course, boundaries, but like interact with them. That's and cheer them on, cheer on your characters. And in these houses, like, take advantage of those originals. You're not going to get them again. And with these IPs, play The Last of Us or watch a walkthrough, whether the PS3, 4, or 5. Chucky, watch all the movies. You're going to love it. And then, of course, we got 2 seasons of this television show. Check your local listings. Stranger Things 4. What a season. It's going to be so good. The Exorcist Believer. Hey, you can't watch that movie, but you can watch the original movie. You can read the book like I'm doing. And, cross your fingers, hope for the best. And then Universal Monsters. There's so many, but 1933 Invisible Man. I'd say 1925 Phantom. 1923 Hunchback of Notre Dame. 1913 Jekyll and Hyde. And for funsies, Abbott and Costello meet Jekyll and Hyde. Get some silent movie in. If you don't watch silent movies, it's the perfect opportunity to build your film literacy, gang. Yeah, it's going to be a great year, I think. We're days away. So I'm pumped, and I hope y'all are pumped. Again, thank you so much, Christian and Jonathan, for joining us. Where can the people find you?
I most often use my Twitter, or if you want to say now, it's X. My Twitter is CJNIXON2000. You can find me there. I post a little bit of everything. I'm mostly into the music scene, but once HHN comes around, I'll be talking a lot about that. So feel free to give me a follow there. Also my letterbox. So I will be doing my homework with Chucky with the Universal Monsters, with the Exorcist, and I will be Christian_NXN on Letterboxd, so feel free to give me a follow there. I don't take it seriously. I like to write silly little reviews, and I'm just there for a good time. So feel free to shout me out there, and I will see you guys around.
Yeah. And as for me, I am a co-host on the podcast, HHN 365, a Halloween Horror Nights podcast, where we talk about what it implies, Halloween Horror Nights every week. Either Orlando, which we cover majority of the time, but also HHN Hollywood, which we've been talking about a lot, and even Singapore and HHN Japan sometimes. We talk all about Halloween Horror Nights in every capacity. We've been covering the event like crazy, and now we're almost here, especially by the time this episode releases. So that's always fun. For the podcast, you can find us on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or wherever you listen to your podcasts. Just type in HHN 365 and we'll probably pop up. And on social media, you can find us at on Twitter and Instagram at HHN 365 and on TikTok at HHN 365 pod. We particularly post construction updates on Instagram and TikTok. So if you're interested in following along with us, though I guess at this point it's not really going to matter, but interested in following along with this video content for when the event happens, you can follow us on there as well. And yeah. Oh, actually, I forgot one more thing because we just started it up. We have a YouTube channel as well. Same thing, HHN 365. We are releasing a video for the Taste of Terror experience. We got to go check that out, and we recorded our thoughts on the food and the atmosphere and everything like that. But yeah, thank you so much.
That's so cool. Well, thank you guys for coming on. I'm so happy that you both could make it, and you both had such interesting takes on things and great things to say, and you've been very patient with us because listeners know that we talk about Horror Nights for far longer than we ever expect to. So thank you guys for listening, listeners, for this long, and thank both of you for sticking around with us. But it has just been so much fun talking to all of you, and it's been great.
Yeah, this has been so much fun. Christian, I know. His Letterboxd reviews are very funny, so if you don't follow Christian on Letterboxd, now you have to. And Jonathan, I love all of your content over on HHN 365. So it's been so nice talking to you guys and kind of discussing all of our, our thoughts and our feelings about everything. And I'm so excited for the season to see what happens.
Thank you once again for listening to this very special episode of Theme Park Workshop, the podcast. But the fun is not over yet. Stay tuned tomorrow for a part 2 of sorts as we go further into the other dark offerings at Universal's Halloween Horror Nights in Orlando, as well as other Halloween festivities at Universal Orlando Resort. How can you keep track of the show? How can you follow the show? Well, subscribe to us on YouTube and all the other podcast apps that we're on. You can follow us directly on Twitter at Workshop TP, as well as at Theme Park Workshop on Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook. You can follow myself at AdamJ_film on Twitter, as well as Kelly at Killer_Kells on Twitter, and Bella at Bella Harvey with 2 Y's on Twitter and on Instagram at Flynn Rider's Nose. Join our Patreon. Special thanks to our patrons, Jonathan Edward, Landon Kanoki, Jordan Buster, Joshua Gonzalez, and Greg Harvey. Thank you so much for your patronage. Join our Patreon at patreon.com/themeparkworkshop for bonus episodes, updates, and more. Stay tuned, and we'll see you in the fall.